Hello and welcome. I'm Jono Hayes and you're watching W News broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Israel's latest strikes and evacuation orders in Gaza have killed dozens, deepened the hunger crisis and crippled humanitarian operations as ceasefire talks stall. Plus, Iran is set to resume nuclear talks with Europe as a threat of renewed UN sanctions loom. And sectarian violence rocks southern Syria as Bedouin fighters threaten to storm Sueda yet again over the stalled hostage deal. Deadly chaos is unfolding in Gaza, where Israeli forces reportedly killed over 90 Palestinians trying to collect aid as hunger displacement reached critical levels. The UN says Israel's latest evacuation orders have shattered remaining humanitarian lifelines, pushing over 2 million people into just 12% of the territory. Meanwhile, ceasefire talks appear to be faltering, with Hamas warning that the rising death toll and starvation could derail negotiations. For more on this, I'm joined by our Tel Aviv correspondent, Blake Sifton. Blake, what has the Israeli military said to explain the decision to open fire on Palestinians who are just seeking aid? And based on what you've observed, how do these explanations compare with the situation that we're seeing on the ground?
In response to the killings at the aid distribution point near the Zakim crossing in northern Gaza yesterday, the Israeli military acknowledged firing. However, they said that they were warning shots to remove an immediate threat posed to the troops. They also said that the death toll being released by local health authorities was greatly exaggerated. Of course, Israeli soldiers have been implicated in near daily shootings, deadly shootings, near aid distribution points across Gaza. And these have become basically standard justifications. They say they only fire in self-defense and only fire warning shots. What's different this time is that the World Food Program has directly accused Israeli forces of firing on the crowd with sniper fire as well as tank fire. The World Food Program has reasonable working relations with the Israeli government, and their version of events will lead serious credibility to the witness testimony being recorded on the ground. Also, just within the last couple of hours, the foreign ministers of 26 nations, including the UK, Australia, France, and Canada, have come out with a joint statement on this issue. They condemned what they call the drip feeding of aid and inhumane killing of civilians, including children, seeking to meet their most basic needs of water and food.
Blake, what more can you tell us about the Israeli raids that we're hearing about today in Deir al-Balah and the impact on the civilians who are simply trying to flee the area?
Those attacks began early on Monday morning with heavy airstrikes and shelling from naval ships as well as artillery. Israeli tanks and armored vehicles have entered Deir al-Balah. There is heavy machine gun fire being reported. Of course, Deir al-Balah is home to tens of thousands of Palestinians, internally displaced Palestinians who fled earlier invasions of Rafah and Khan Yunis. And when the evacuation order was issued by the Israeli military on Sunday morning, thousands of them began collecting what little they could and began fleeing to the south. Deir al-Balah, while it suffered airstrikes in the past, it has never seen an Israeli ground invasion. It's one of the few locations in Gaza that has not suffered a ground invasion. So the infrastructure there had been relatively intact. Al-Aqsa Hospital, which is one of the last remaining functioning hospitals in Gaza, is in Deir al-Balah, and many humanitarian organizations, including UN organizations, are based there. So there are fears that if open combat continues in Deir al-Balah and that the area is ravaged, that this critical infrastructure, these critical services, could be badly affected. As well, it should be noted that the reason Israeli forces had not entered Deir al-Balah in the past is because it's believed that at least some of the Israeli hostages being held in Gaza are there, and there was concerns that a ground operation there could lead to them being harmed. So the family members of these hostages are outraged and are greatly in fear that this ground operation could see harm come to their loved ones.
Lake Sifton in Tel Aviv, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to continue this conversation. We're joined from Amman by Juliet Touma, who's the UNRWA Director of Communications. Juliet, first of all, thanks for joining us. What can you tell us about the reports that we're hearing of civilians being killed while simply trying to collect aid? How is this affecting the ability of UNRWA to distribute supplies safely in the region?
Thanks so much for having me. Look, the current distribution that is managed by the American and Israeli governments is dangerous, is not working. It's taking more lives than saving lives in the Gaza Strip. Starving people are absolutely desperate for some food have been killed. We estimate that it could be up to 1,000 people killed since this new flood mechanism started operating just at the end of May.
Tell us a bit, Juliet, about the current conditions civilians are facing. We're hearing that everyone's crammed into the remaining 12% of territory in Gaza right now. So what are the conditions like on the ground for people?
Yes, well, people have been ordered to look for safety, which is non-existent in Gaza once again. And the population of about 2 million people, half of them are children, are crammed in just over 1/10 of the Gaza Strip. And the situation is desperate, to say the least. It's an understatement. I woke up this morning to messages, SOS messages from staff who were looking for food for days on end before they could find a bag of flour. Our staff are fainting due to exhaustion and hunger and starvation while they are on duty. So the caretakers themselves need care now in Gaza.
And you briefly mentioned it there, Juliet, but aside from the day-to-day issues that your staff are facing, what risks are they in, especially in areas like Deir al-Balah, which we're hearing today military operations from Israel have expanded into there as well?
That's where most of the humanitarian presence, not only for UNRWA, but also for other humanitarian organizations, that's where we've been based. We've been ourselves, like the rest of the community, being shuffled around from Gaza City to the south in Rifai, then to Khan Yunis, then to Deir al-Balah. And so we've also had to move. And eventually we've settled, so to speak, in that part of Gaza. Now, it's incredibly dangerous, including for staff who are currently there. I've spoken to one staff member who said that they escaped the shelter. They were displaced too and taken refuge in just a few hours before that shelter was bombed.
UNRWA and your representatives have said that food is stockpiled just outside Gaza. What is preventing it from reaching those who really, at this stage, critically need it most? What needs to change to make that happen?
Yes, we've got just over 6,000 trucks of aid here in Jordan and also in Egypt, full of food that's soon expiring, full of medicines and medical and hygiene supplies meant for the communities across Gaza. There's been a siege since the 2nd of March imposed by the Israeli authorities. And as a result, UNRWA has been banned to bring in any of these basic life-saving supplies into Gaza. And meanwhile, it is absolutely horrendous to watch images of babies dying because of lack of food, and more fragile and vulnerable adults also dying because of severe malnutrition.
Juliet, worrying that in the last 24 hours, 19 people have died from starvation, and there's obviously an escalation in attacks that we're seeing in the last 24 hours. Is this attack and this escalation going to affect the aid that has been sent out? And also, are aid seekers been deterred? What protection is on the ground for anyone at this stage?
Okay, let's set the record straight. There's not much aid going in, huh? And what is coming in is a little drip or drop, huh? We have thousands, like I said, of trucks that must be let in. So the gates must be open. There must be pressure from countries around the world on the state of Israel to open the gates, to lift the siege, to reach a deal, to release the hostages, to bring in a volume of humanitarian supplies under the administration and coordination of UNRWA. And back then, we will have a ceasefire, so it will be safe for us to distribute that aid, just like we did for the short-lived period from January to March earlier this year.
Juliet, Tuma from UNRWA, thank you so much for joining us. Iran says it will meet with European powers for nuclear talks in Istanbul this Friday, the first since last month's US strikes on its nuclear facilities. The talks come as Britain, France and Germany all threaten to reimpose UN sanctions if Tehran fails to return to the negotiating table. Iran, meanwhile, is warning it could pull back from key security commitments if it's pressured further. For more on this, I'm joined in the studio by a member of the National Security Committee of Germany's ruling CDU party, Mostapha Ammar. Mostapha, thank you for joining us in the studio. First of all, do you think the chances of these talks in Istanbul are going to progress into something meaningful on Iran's nuclear program, or what is the next step, do you think?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. With Iran, there is nothing guarantee that is something going to be successful in this way, because, we've been trying to do a lot of diplomatic talk. We've been trying to also to bring Iranian to the table since many, many years, but, they are trying always to escape from the dialogue. So this time, Germany is ready, not only Germany, but the E3 are ready and willing to convince Iranian to come in a peaceful way. But if not, I think there is also another, let's say, we are very, very hard and very rushed this time because there is nothing between. Are they going to cooperate with us, with the E3? Or if not, there is the snapbacks on the table. So I think this is the only weapon that they are, or let's say the only paper that are in the hand in the European right now. But for sure, we are coordinating also with the United States of America, and we are following what the United States of America are going to do. But first of all, we have to see. Let's be, I would say, optimistic about this meeting the Friday, because this is also the preparing meeting before the end of summer. So I hope that they are going to do something which be good for the and to also to how to say that to involve to support also the peace movement in the region. But myself, in my opinion, let me say, as a security expert in that way, Iranian, they are always trying to to play the role of the gangster. They are never. We cannot trust them in a security way, because we just sanctioned them in the 15th of July this month. It was with the support of Germany. European, they are sanctioned a group called Sindashti. This is group, and this group is let's say that this is the arm of Iranian. They try to kidnapping and to killing also journalists, and try also to kidnap many Iranian people who living in Germany. And this is also a very clear threat for our national security in Europe, and not only for the national security, but also this is a big threat for the globe security. And we try to do our best, and we sanction them. This is a very good thing. I think, let's say, this is the very strong move from the Europeans since many years. So we are doing good at this time, especially we have now a new government with our leadership from Friedrich Merz. This man, we call it in Germany a Macher, mean that this man a play power. So this is something power player in the globe, and I think he's going to do good things for the globe, not only for the Europe.
Now, you did mention the snapback as well. How likely and how serious is the E3's snapback threat? Do you think it will come to fruition? How is Berlin going to approach this, first of all, given Germany's role in the efforts to to revive this nuclear deal?
Well, this is also a very good question, because as I said, now we're having a new government. That means we are not related to any previous government. We're having our new art and a new way, and we deal with all conflicts very seriously. We're having a new chancellor, and this chancellor, Friedrich Merz, as I say, we call it a macher. A macher, that means power player. So that means he's the one who really want to get things good and done in a good way. So, and I think that we are much better than before. But I hope that the Iranian, now let's say the ball is in the Iranian court, and I hope they are going to listen very well, because if that we are going to do the snapback, so that will be also an awareness for the region here, especially also for the Gulf states and also for the Middle East. It will be maybe a very big action in the future.
We've heard Iran accusing Britain, France and Germany of violating the 2015 nuclear deal. Do you believe those claims are valid?
Well, we, as I said, we have now a new government, a new face, and I think now we are much powerful than before.
But do you is there any validity to the claims that this has been, be it by the old government or the new government, has there been a violation, do you think, of the 2015 deal?
Well, now we're having, after what happened, since the last tensions and since the last escalation, I think now we are facing a new era, we call it Zeitenwende. That means a new turning point. So I think everything will change for the good way to be protected, our security and also the global security.
Iran's threat to pull back from its security commitments, do you think that's going to destabilize the region a lot more than we're currently seeing? We have to keep pressure. We have to keep also the pressure on Iranian. So that means that we need to do more sanctions package. That means more sanction package. That means that will also eliminate the Iranian, because Iranian, they are never using their military. They try always to using Houthis terrorism. They try to using also Hamas. They try to using always their group and their arms in Iraq even. So we need to be aware about that. But I think with the sanction, with the new government, with the new faces, I think we're going to reach a good result. What more sanctions do you think you could see in the next couple of weeks if Iran don't come to the negotiating table? Well,
the big things that I always focus, not only also my colleagues and also many security experts, that we need to list the IRGC. This is I call it of Arabic al-Haras al-Thawri. We need to put it on the terrorism list. We need to sanction them very hard in European, like what another countries did here in GCC countries. They did that. So why we have not do this? And if we are really able and capable also to do with the GCC, to be also our partner in the near future, to cooperate to de-escalation also the situation. So we need also to take, we need to also to pay attention for the security, because we have to put, which they call it on Arabic, al-Haras al-Thawri, the RGC. So we need to do it immediately on the European list.
We've mentioned a lot about Europe, we've mentioned a lot about the GCC. Russia and China, what role do you see them playing in this? They've got an upcoming meeting as well with Iran. Could the Western pressure influence that meeting, do you think?
Well, Russia try always to escape from the war for the invasion in Ukraine. I think Russia need now more to focus on the dialogue or to sit together on table with the Ukrainian, because to involve now on this matter or on this conflict, I think this is just an illusion. So it's better now to stop the war in Ukraine and to start a new pages. Maybe this is also with the help of the GCC. We're still waiting to see some results, but I don't think so that Russia or China can play a big role with the Iranian side. So Iranian need to decide itself. Otherwise, as I say, the snapbacks is on the table.
Well, I appreciate you coming to the studio and to talk to us today. Mostapha Al-Ammar, thank you so much, member of the National Security Committee of Germany's ruling CDU party. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba says he will stay on as the leader. That's despite his ruling coalition's setback in the upper house election. Ishiba says he plans to lead upcoming trade negotiations with the United States. The ruling coalition secured 47 seats, that's 3 short of the 50 that's needed, to maintain control of the upper chamber. 5 days of torrential rain in South Korea has left at least 17 people dead and 11 more missing. Southern regions have been hit by up to around 24 to 31 inches of rain since the downpour began last week. The government weather forecaster predicts that the rainfall is likely to stop by Sunday, but that will be followed by a heat wave. At least 5 people have died and 284 have been rescued from a ferry fire off the coast of Indonesia's Sulawesi Island. Passengers were seen diving into the water with life jackets to escape the flames from the KM Barcelona 5 vessel. According to officials, the blaze is believed to have started on the upper deck. 6 people have been arrested. The latest protest outside a hotel that is used to house asylum seekers in Essex in the UK. Protesters marched with placards that read "Save our kids and deport foreign rapists." The disorder followed the arrest and charge of an asylum seeker on suspicion of an alleged sexual assault. The Chinese premier has attended the launching ceremony of a megadam project on the Tibetan plateau. Once completed, it is expected to become the world's largest hydroelectric facility. The plans don't come without controversy, though. Yana Li in Beijing has more details.
China's premier is calling this a project of the century. 5 years after it was first announced, construction has started on a minimum $167 billion dam on the Yarlung-Zangbo. Now that's the river that flows through the Tibetan plateau. Billed as the world's biggest hydroelectric facility, it is set to have 5 mega power stations. The Yarlung-Zangbo was picked because of its potential. A part of it has a 2,000-meter drop, making it ideal for hydropower. If you remember China's famous Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze River, well, this one will be 3 times the size of that one. And the goal with this hydropower dam is to produce as much electricity every year as what all of Britain consumes. The new dam could thus help China with its clean energy initiatives as authorities push towards their net zero emissions targets for 2060. But not everyone is thrilled with the news. First of all, further downstream lies India and Bangladesh. The Yarlung-Zangbo actually becomes the Brahmaputra River. One Indian leader says that this Chinese project could dry out some 80% of the waters passing through his estate, Arunachal Pradesh. Plus, Beijing's potential capacity to turn the tap on and off to vast populations in other countries may not be a prospect they're particularly comfortable with. New Delhi has already raised concerns with Beijing back in December. It also doesn't help that India and China have had rather difficult relations as of late, though their ties have defrosted after a 4-year deadlock. A colossal project like this one could add some tension. Environmental NGOs, too, aren't impressed, arguing that the ecological diversity of the Tibetan plateau could be threatened, and they're also concerned about the potential displacement of local populations, too. Beijing insists, though, that a thorough examination of the environmental impact has been done and that China will not try to benefit from the river at the expense of its neighbours. For now, markets at least seem to be very keen on the idea. Shares for several Chinese building companies and cement makers have jumped. Such a major construction project, of course, is bound to have trickle-down effects on multiple sectors and boost economic growth.
Deadly sectarian clashes in southern Syria have displaced over 120,000 people and left dozens dead as fighting between Druze Bedouin militias spills into a second week. The Syrian government has begun evacuating Bedouin families from Sweda, where a fragile ceasefire is barely holding. Bedouin fighters say they won't wait much longer, warning they'll storm the city if their injured and detained are not released. For more on this story, we're joined by political analyst Hamdan Rifai. Hamdan, thank you. First of all, what does this eruption of sectarian violence in Sweda that we're seeing yet again tell us about the fragility of Syria's post-war landscape, especially in a minority-dominated area like Sweda?
Well, it's important to understand that there are 2 camps involved in stabilizing Syria and destabilizing Syria. So one camp wants to bring stability, the other camp wants to destabilize it. And the destabilizing camp are the minorities. Many of them are supported by Israel, and the Syrian government doesn't have control of much of these areas that are inhabited by small percentages of minorities ranging from 10% to much higher percentages like the Druze areas. So what we see is the Druze in Sueda and elsewhere seeing an opportunity to self-govern, have privilege, have power in excess of their place in the society. And the Kurds, of course, have latched onto them. We saw protests in Germany today where the Kurds and the Druze actually came together, even though these groups have virtually nothing in common and have never done so in the past. This sectarian violence is a result of them understanding that there was a program, and that program was to destabilize Syria, and they can use that program from foreign interference of destabilizing Syria to get power themselves. And obviously they're supported, when we say the Druze, it's not the ethnic group, the Druze, it's Hekmet Hajiri and militias that have something to gain here. And many of the Druze have spoken out against them even. So they're supported by Iran, they're supported by Israel, and they're seeking to take an opportunity.
Hamdi, let's talk about the Syrian government's role in these clashes as well. There are reports that it has sided with Bedouin fighters against the Druze militias. Do we know if there's truth behind that claim?
I don't think that there's truth behind the claim that they've sided behind them. Certainly, the Bedouin fighters are seeking to quell the Druze in that area because the Druze fought them. So there's a natural inclination there, since the Syrian government has to control the Druze from their belligerence and the violence, that they would appear to be on that same side, if you were to try to define sides, as the Bedouins, because the Druze are the ones who attacked the Bedouins. But in fact, the Syrian government has issued statement after statement saying that all non-state armed militias must disarm and discontinue violence. The other thing that we must remember here is that many of these Bedouin tribes have actually supported the revolution, whereas Hekmet Hajiri and many of those people were supporting Assad in the past. So these people are upset with the new Syrian government versus the Bedouin tribes, who are happy to work with the new Syrian government to try to bring stability and stop the violence. So certainly there's going to be accusations made on both sides, and we can't know the complete truth. There are going to be incidents and there are going to be rogue actors, of course. There's a lot of misinformation going on, but there is a natural inclination for the government to accept the acts of the Bedouin tribes much more readily than the Druze, of course.
Hamdi, you mentioned it briefly there, but Israel's real objective here, when they launched airstrikes in a Druze majority area like Sueda, is it to try and weaken support for President al-Shara, or is it actually to protect the Druze communities, do you think?
There's no basis for Israel to claim it's protecting anyone. They're bombing Catholic churches in Israel. They, are committing an ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. They have been bombing in Syria for 14 years and never stopped. If they cared about the Druze, they could have done something before. The fact is that Israel doesn't care about the Druze. They have a small number of Druze in Israel that they pander to some extent, because they make up 5% of the IDF forces, a number larger than their population, than their numbers in the general population. However, it's clear that Druze leaders have said, we don't want Israel's support. Everyone has said that except Hekmet Hajiri and a few militias. So, the claim that Israel is a protector of anyone violating the territorial integrity of a sovereign nation next door is really a flaccid argument with no factual basis.
Hamdi, as you mentioned, who is giving support, but the US envoy, they have given blunt support for the Syrian government, as mentioned by Tom Barak. Is Washington quietly pivoting towards normalization in an effort to block Iranian and Russian leverages in South Syria?
The U.S. has been very clear. Trump himself has been clear. Tom Barak has been clear. They want to see a stable Syria. And the only opportunity to create a stable Syria is by ensuring the success of the Syrian government. And the success of the Syrian government in creating that stability isn't only for Syria, it's for a larger stability throughout the Middle East. If stability can be created by the United States and stability in Syria through normalization, of course, then what we can see is that the rest of the Middle East will benefit greatly from it. There's economic opportunity to be gained here. There's opportunity for growth of the nations, for normalcy with Israel even.
Hamdi, Rifai in Washington, D.C., thank you so much for joining us. Tributes are being paid to the American World War II veteran and social media star Jake Larson, who has passed away at 102 years old. He was known online as Papa Jake and had 1.2 million followers on TikTok. He was famous for sharing stories of his fallen comrades. He's also just co-won an Emmy Award for an interview marking the latest 80th anniversary of D-Day. For more on this, we're joined from Washington by our correspondent, Sarah Firth. Sarah, thanks for joining us. We know that he has become a viral star very late in life, but who is the man behind Papa Jake before TikTok sensation?
Yes, Papa Jake Larson, Jono, is first and foremost a soldier and a survivor. He was 102 when he died. And it was only in recent days that he had become this viral TikTok sensation. His granddaughter had introduced him to it in 2020 after a cancelled D-Day event. And he'd started sharing his stories, his memories of his time in the war. He was just 15 years old when he signed up to the US Army. He claimed he was 18 years old, and he was one of the soldiers who was on Omaha Beach on D-Day, that stormed the beach to push out the Germans who were occupying Normandy. 34,000 soldiers that had stormed that beach, and more than 2,400 men died that day. And really, what you saw Jake Larson do with his story time with Papa Jake, as it was known, is keep their memories alive. His focus was on commemorating the sacrifice that they made and educating the younger generation as well. And he did it with a lot of humor, a lot of love, and a lot of humility as well.
It's unusual because a lot of the TikTok audience obviously wouldn't have living memory of World War II. So what exactly made Papa Jake's TikTok videos resonate so widely, especially with a very young audience who are active on TikTok?
Yeah, so I was watching some of them back today, you know, with the announcement from his granddaughter that he'd passed away on the 17th of July. And it's just incredibly authentic. It's incredibly real. He didn't set out to be a TikTok star, of course. He's not of that generation, but he really embraced the interest in the stories that he had, sharing about his times in the war and the importance of remembering that sacrifice even today. And it really resonated with audiences. You know, he had a lot of grit. He had a lot of determination. But aside from the social media aspect, he was this humble Midwestern man. He lived quite a quiet post-war life. He was really focused on raising his family. His granddaughter, Michaela Larson, made an announcement on the TikTok when he passed away saying, "I'm so thankful to have shared my Papa Jake with you all. You meant the world to him. When the time is right," she says, she'll continue to share Papa Jake's stories to keep his memories alive. And Jono, his focus, as I said, was really on commemorating the people who laid down their lives. As you mentioned, he'd won an Emmy recently, and the video of him winning that Emmy is just absolutely beautiful. You know, he was just thrilled. But aside, again, from that sort of limelight that he had drawn attention with the stories, the focus really was on keeping that history alive. You know, he was this living history of a time so many who are on TikTok just wouldn't have known about. 1.2 million followers and, you know, millions of views on his really touching videos sharing that history.
Sarah, from one Emmy winner to a former Emmy winner, Ellen DeGeneres has spoken about her decision to settle in the UK. So why exactly did she leave the United States? What's she saying for the first time that she's spoken in quite a long time, I believe, since she relocated and moved her life to the UK?
Yes, some fascinating insight from Ellen DeGeneres. She was speaking in the UK in that interview. The reason that she says she left the US, Donald Trump. She says that it was because he was re-elected, and the day after he was re-elected, she recounts getting messages from friends, from people who lived in the United States, and her wife, who had bought this place in the United Kingdom. They thought it was going to be part-time, maybe 3-4 months a year. They decided they were going to stay. So the interviewer asked her bluntly, was this because of President Donald Trump, his re-election? And she said, yes, it was. She also spoke, it was a personal decision to remain in the UK, but there was definitely a political edge there as well, because as well as the Donald Trump being re-elected, she spoke about how difficult it was in the United States these days for people to be able to be themselves. And she even spoke at one point about possibly her and her wife getting remarried in the United Kingdom, speaking about the challenges to same-sex marriage in the US under President Trump. So really, some insight into a pretty major decision to move over to the United Kingdom. And this is one of America's biggest TV stars for, decades, nearly 30 years. And so that's going to definitely raise some eyebrows, giving that very clear, fascinating insight into her reasoning behind that.
And we do know that you mentioned very quickly before we let you go the toxicity in the workplace allegations, which is what's the reason that she finished up the show in the first place. She's reflected on that. And what has she said?
Jono, she wants everyone to know she doesn't think she's mean, she thinks she's blunt. She was very candid about that. She also said that, look, it was a difficult way to end her career. It clearly is a chapter that still stings. Will there be a comeback, though? She did hint that maybe there would be some kind of UK comeback, perhaps, saying she's very happy right now in the United Kingdom with her chickens, but she does sometimes get a little bit bored.
Sounds delightful. Sarah Firth in Washington, thank you so much. Let's take a look at the top business news for today. Starbucks has announced its beloved pumpkin spice latte will return to stores in the US and Canada starting on the 26th of August. Since its debut in 2003, the seasonal favourite has inspired countless imitators and remains the coffee joint's top-selling fall drink. US carrier Alaska Airlines resumes operations after briefly grounding all of its flights for about 3 hours due to an IT outage. This marks the second time that the airline has halted its fleet in just over a year. Alaska's IT issues follow the FBI revealing that a cyber-criminal group was allegedly planning to hack US airlines. Turning to sport now, 7-time Grand Slam champion Venus Williams is set to return to the court after a 16-month break. She'll compete at this week's Washington Open, saying that her recent trip to Wimbledon reignited her passion for the game. American golfer Scottie Scheffler has delivered a winning performance which secured his first British Open at the Royal Portrush. Scheffler needed the US Open to become the 7th player to complete the Grand Slam. A grand total of $17 million was up for grabs this year in the British Open, along with the claret jug and a gold medal. Scheffler walked away with $3.1 million of the grand prize total. And a reminder of our top stories today. Israel's latest strikes and evacuation orders in Gaza have killed dozens, deepened the hunger crisis, and crippled humanitarian operations as ceasefire talks have stalled. Plus, Iran is set to resume nuclear talks with Europe as the threat of renewed UN sanctions loom. And sectarian violence rocks southern Syria as Bedouin fighters threaten to storm Sueda once again over a stalled hostage deal. That's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. As always, you can follow us on X. The Real Deal is coming up next, and we'll be back in just a couple of hours with W News Extra. Goodbye.